Hello, everyone. I'm Suganya, and this is my colleague Vinodh. And we are
Hello.
both very excited to give this talk today about an interesting phenomenon of a bilingual dialect requiring bi-scriptualism. And to take you along with us across 1.5 millennia to meet writers, scribes, editors, and typesetters, and to see how they have dealt with the challenges that this has posed. Let me share the screen. Okay, should be fine now. So we will first define this mixed language, Manipravala, and then briefly introduce the most common scripts used while dealing with Manipravala, and then give an outline of many of the possible and ingenious methods that were adopted to transcribe Manipravala, each time with a brief brief description and a briefer analysis, for this paper is but a stepping stone that will take us to a larger, deeper study that we are planning, and therefore will only focus on the essential. So Manipravala. Manipravala is an interesting blend of Sanskrit and a vernacular language, and in this paper, we'll focus on a blend of Tamil and Sanskrit, and this is used in literature since at least this has been used in literature since at least the 12th century CE. There are different types of Tamil Manipravala, including the ones used by the Jains or the Shaivas, religious people of southern India, but also elsewhere. But we will focus here on the more prolific Sri Vaishnavas, followers of philosopher Ramanuja. Such a hybrid language combining Sanskrit with Tamil, which is actually a language that does not have all the letters to represent all the sounds that exist in Sanskrit, has been something of a challenge when it came to writing it down, especially when it became a question of making the text accessible to an increasingly wide and changing audience, especially during the modern period, and thereby making sure that the texts do not go extinct. Here are some of the scripts used during the different time periods. It's not very exhaustive, but still, it's a beginning. But before we say more on this, let us introduce the main scripts that were used to transcribe Manipravala. First of all, Tamil. The Tamil script was used to transcribe Tamil, and the script as we know it now has existed since at least the 7th century CE, used by the Pallava kings, whose kingdom I have marked here in yellow on the map. It is a major script and has simple syllable structures, and it doesn't have, as I said before, all the letters to represent all the sounds that exist in Sanskrit. Now, then there is the Grantha script, a very important one. It's the script that was used to transcribe Sanskrit in southern India since at least the 5th century CE, used once again by the Pallava kings in their inscriptions, for example. It still exists, but it's not as widespread as it used to be. And its syllable structures are complicated with stackings, ligatures, etc. Now, the Telugu script is the next one. It is used to transcribe the Telugu language, as its name indicates, which Telugu is another Dravidian language of southern India. And it has existed, the script, since at least the 14th century. And it is a major script, and it supports both Tamil and Sanskrit phonemes. And finally, we have the Devanagari script, which is used to transcribe Sanskrit, and it's actually a major script and also a standard script for Sanskrit in the modern era. And it is also used for many other North Indian vernaculars, including Hindi. So here's a look at a sample word transcribed in the many different scripts that were and are still used while dealing with Manipravala. Now let's move to the pre-modern period to have a quick look at the scripts used during that period of time before the advent of the British and the modern period. So in the inscriptions, for example, in this one that you can see on your screen, of the first millennium, the Tamil script was used for Tamil and the Grantha for the Sanskrit words, pardon. And then the same practice was adopted by the common people who used palm leaf manuscripts to write the same kind of things, not necessarily literature, etc., whatever they were bent on writing, intent upon writing, rather. So the Manipravala users use the Tamil script for the Tamil words and Grantha for either the whole Sanskrit words or just specific phonemes, as we can actually see here. Now, let us move to an important phase in the history of the transcription of Manipravala, the colonial period. Now, colonization brought about deep changes in the southern Indian society, not just, but still. For example, the transmission of knowledge changed deeply with modern schools being founded, the transmission of texts, the pattern was changed with the arrival and the spread of the printing press, which was quite an important phenomenon as it democratized the access to many of these texts. And perhaps also quite importantly, as you see on this map, the British colonials actually changed the regional borders in order to suit the political needs, their own political needs, for example, by forming this Madras presidency that you can see here. And then bringing together in that way people of different languages like the Tamils and Telugus in this case, which had an impact on how Manipravala was transcribed. Now, we shall move on now to see mostly how the editors of printed editions dealt with the Manipravala challenge during this period. Here's a first example. Some editors tried to maintain the tradition, that is, using the Grantha script for Sanskrit words in red here, and then the Tamil for the Tamil words in green here. So this required the modern audience to know both the scripts, not always a very easy thing. And others use the Grantha only for Sanskrit quotations, here marked here in red again, while the individual Sanskrit words, marked in blue here, in the body of the text, where they were actually left in the Tamil script. Now, this required the readers to know both the Grantha and the Tamil scripts, but also compromised the pronunciation of the Sanskrit words when they were written in Tamil. Sometimes the Tamil script was supplied with Grantha letters when needed, only when needed, in red here. This made reading easier for the Tamil people, although an evident lack of consistency, marked here in blue, in editions such as this one, might have compromised the readability of the text itself. Now, over to Vinodh.
Now we move on to the Telugu script. This is quite similar to the 1920 publication we saw earlier in slide 14. As in, it uses like a special script only for the extended quotation. But in this case, instead of the Grantha script, we use the Telugu script. And we need a little bit of background for that. As we saw earlier, Grantha being a specialized script, it would have been different to typesetted, particularly 100 years ago. So initially, publishers experimented with replacing only the extended Sanskrit codes with the Telugu script. It made printing easier, it made typesetting easier. But again, the problem is like you still end up using two scripts. As we mentioned earlier, Telugu can express both Tamil and Sanskrit sounds. So in this attempt, what publishers did, why can't we just use the Telugu script for the entire text? And that's what they did here. The Manipravala text is rendered in the Telugu script. It works out in the sense like it preserves the content very accurately. But unfortunately, the text is rendered in a script that people are not used to read. In this case, the Tamils are not used to reading the Tamil language in the Telugu script. So it kind of compromises itself in the area of like accessibility. Now we move on to the post-colonial time. After Indian independence, the Telugu and Tamil lands were split. So fewer people knew the Telugu language unscript. And the rise of various movements such as Dravidian movement meant that like very few people knew language, anything other than Tamil. Hence, to cater this monoliterate Tamil population, publishers decided to render everything in Tamil. This made the text very, very accessible, but also grossly inefficient, as Tamil cannot render Sanskrit sounds at all. So to make up for the lack of like preservation of Sanskrit phonemes and increase the accuracy of the text, people try to retroactively mark those sounds using diacritics. In this case, they used numerals 2, 3, and 4 to mark voiced and aspirated phonemes. It works. However, since everything is in Tamil, of course, with diacritics, it still meant like some people probably ignore everything and will read the text as if it were Tamil. Again, so there's another attempt to resolve all this possibly. Here, publishers just use a standardized script for each language for that time period in the 90s. In this case, they use Devanagari for Sanskrit and Tamil for Tamil. The result is very accurate. You can see the different linguistic components. Whatever is in Devanagari is Sanskrit and whatever is in Tamil is Tamil. Again, however, the problem is like the result is not aesthetically pleasing, one. And two, maybe the most important one, not many people can read Devanagari, which again meant like the text is not very accessible. Again, I said not everyone can read Devanagari. Here, publishers print something in Devanagari, but again, echo it in the Tamil script with numerals to make sure like everybody can read the text and no one is left out. Now, apart from those 3 attempts that we saw, using numerals, people also tried lots of other ad hoc attempts to render Sanskrit phonemes in Tamil script. And we show one example. Here, people use formatting, text formatting, as in they use underline and bold text to mark Sanskrit phonemes. And these are just ad hoc attempts. Each publication had their own notation. And not all of these attempts read to like very readable, unambiguous text. Particularly using formatting to actually mark phonemes, it's not very efficient. It's very hard to read. Finally, we enter the academic world. Again, as you know, in academia, it's very common to typeset a language, particularly that uses a complex script in Latin, particularly a diacritic Latin. And while it's a very good technique for academics who can't read Indian scripts, in sense, it makes it easier for them to access the script. However, for many day-to-day Indians, they're not used to read diacritic Latin, which means the text looks very, very alien to them, even perhaps more alien than rendering Tamil in the Telugu script. But however, there is a need for Romanized Manipravala, particularly for, say, overseas Indians who want to read religious texts, but they can't read Tamil, Telugu, or Devanagari, or any other Indian script for that matter. What the editors have tried here is to render the text in what I'd call informal romanization, where they use case mixing to mark the vowel length, to mark special consonant not present in English. And they sort of use this digraphs and trigraphs that are very common in Romanized Tamil when people use like people use in informal context, such as in social media or in emails or in chatting. The result is like you see the text is slightly weird looking, possibly because of case mixing. However, the text is probably readable to someone who can't read any Indian script, perhaps more readable than the diacritic Latin that we saw earlier. Here we provide a preliminary overview of all the orthographies. And as you might see, all of them have their issues. None of them are perfect. And currently, we are planning to resolve this by creating a digital edition of Manipravala, where people can choose to read and access the text in the way that they want, in the format they are comfortable with, and in the scripts that they know. We already have digital tools that allows people to read any text in their preferred scripts and orthographies, and this could be easily adapted to render Manipravala. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. We'll be happy to take questions now.